This day in sports history. This episode is brought to you by the Sterling Soap Company. Christmas will be here before you know it, and you know what would make a great stocking stuffer for everybody in your family? Sterling Soap. From bar soap to shave soap, beard balm to lip balm, aftershaves and lotions, Sterling Soap has something for everyone on your list. Check out their seasonal soaps that will complement the scents of your home this holiday season. And they're more than just soap. They also have a full line of coffee straight from the Sterling Roastery. Find their full line of products at sterlingsoapcompany.com. It's December 2nd, and on this day in 1995, Montreal Canadiens goalie Patrick Roy felt like he was hung out to dry a little bit too long and then demanded to be traded. The Montreal Canadiens were playing at home against the Detroit Red Wings. By this point, Roy was in his 12th year in the league. He'd been a 6-time All-Star and a 3-time Vezina Trophy winner and considered one of the best goalies in the NHL. But on this night, things were not going well for Patrick Roy.
Fedorov, Larionov, here's Primo parked in front, Larionov walking in, Patrick Roy, and he scores on the rebound. A shot loose, Larionov, Kozlov scores. Great chance to change that, Lidstrom scores, didn't take long, did it? Coffey keeps it in at the line with now 1 minute left, nice, and they score again. Larionov, Fedorov scores, 9-1. And the floodgates are open at the Forum.
Through a period and a half, Roy faced 26 shots and allowed 9 goals. He gave up 5 in the first period, and after the 4th and 5th went past him, he looked to the bench for help. He got nothing. And then when Sergei Fedorov scored at the 11:57 mark in the second to give Detroit a 9-1 lead, new head coach Mario Tremblay finally decided to pull Roy and send in Pat Jablonski. Roy was not happy. And again, not because he was pulled. Instead, he was furious that he wasn't pulled after the first period or before. Things between Roy and Tremblay had already been a little bit tense that season, but now things boiled over. When Roy skated to the bench, he first leaned over and screamed at the Montreal Canadiens president, Ronald Corey, and then had some words for Tremblay. He felt like he'd been intentionally embarrassed in front of the home crowd. He demanded a trade from the organization tout de suite. 4 days later, the Canadiens granted Roy's request, sending him and team captain Mike Keane to Colorado for goalie Jocelyn Thibault, Martin Ruchensky, and Andrei Kovalenko. The trade worked out great for Colorado, who went on to play in the franchise's first Stanley Cup Finals and then beat the Florida Panthers in 4 straight to win the Cup. The Avalanche would win a second Cup with Roy in goal at the end of the 2001 season. Roy would go on to play a total of 8 years with the Avalanche, and he was an All-Star 5 of those years. He led the league in goals against average and shutouts in the 01-02 season at the age of 36, and then retired after the 02-03 season. For the Canadiens, things did not exactly go south, but they weren't great. Most Canadiens fans describe the decade and a half following Roy's departure in 1995 as an extended stretch of mediocrity. They missed the playoffs in 4 of their next 10 seasons and did not make it past the second round of the playoffs until 2010. They haven't won the Stanley Cup since 1993, when Patrick Roy was still their number 1. On this day in 1950, it was a surprise finish to the annual Army-Navy game. The Black Knights had not lost a game in nearly 3 seasons. They were ranked number 2 in the country, and a win against the midshipmen would keep their national championship dreams alive. Navy was not supposed to put up much of a fight. They hadn't beaten Army since 1943 and had only won 7 games total in the past 5 seasons. They were 2-6 coming into this one and were 3-touchdown underdogs. In front of 100,000 that included President Harry Truman at Philadelphia's Municipal Stadium, Navy decided to try something a little different. Instead of their standard single-wing attack, the Middies used a T formation and passed out of it often. After an Army fumble in the second quarter, a couple of Bob Zastro completed passes put Navy on the Army 8-yard line. Zastrow bowled his way into the end zone for the first points of the day. Navy went to the air to score their second touchdown just before the half, and they were up 14-0. Defensively, Navy was running a different setup as well, going with a 6-man front and 2 linebackers. The Middies were able to shut down the powerful Army running attack. By halftime, Army had 3 yards in total offense and had only secured 1 first down. The only points that the Cadets could muster on this day were from their defense. Army sacked Zastrow in the end zone for a safety to make the score 14-2. Army did have a shot at scores later in the game, but Navy came up with 2 big interceptions to snuff those out. Navy's win snapped Army's 28-game winning streak. Those covering the game that day on radio called it the greatest upset of the century, and news stories the next day were still in disbelief. Arthur Daly of the New York Post wrote, "It was one of those things that strained credulity. You had to see it to believe it." And the loss did ultimately cost the Black Knights the national championship. Top-ranked Oklahoma was upset in the Sugar Bowl later in the season, but was still named the consensus national champion. On this day in 1985, it was a Monday Night Football game to remember for several reasons. It was Week 13 of the season, and the undefeated Chicago Bears were in Miami, taking on an 8-4 Dolphins team. The Bears were rolling, coming off of consecutive shutouts and outscoring teams 104-3 in their previous 3 games. They seemed destined to close out the regular season without a loss, march to the Super Bowl title, and equal the 1972 Dolphins in the record books as the only other undefeated team in NFL history. But the Dolphins had quarterback Dan Marino and a set of talented wide receivers preparing to put on a showcase and expose defensive coordinator Buddy Ryan's vaunted 46 defense. It didn't take the Dolphins long to start lighting up the scoreboard, scoring on their opening drive on a 33-yard touchdown pass from Marino to Nat Moore. A couple of rushing touchdowns, a blocked punt, setting up another Marino to Moore scoring strike in the closing minutes of the first half, and the Dolphins led 31-10 at the break. Now, Bears head coach Mike Ditka and Ryan had been butting heads for most of the season, and Ditka was not happy watching Dolphin wideouts Moore, Mark Duper, and Mark Clayton scorch Ryan's defense, and he started screaming at Ryan to change up the game plan in the locker room at halftime. Ryan told Ditka that he did not need or want his advice and told him where he could put it. The two were screaming in each other's faces, and whether any punches were ever thrown is still up for debate, with more than a few saying Ditka offered to take their dispute outside. Back out in the hot and humid Orange Bowl for the second half, the Bears narrowed the margin to 31-17 early on, but good fortune, or maybe it was the luck of the 72 Dolphins, that rubbed off on Marino on the next possession. Facing a 3rd and long, Marino tried to dump a pass over the middle, but the ball ricocheted off of a Bears helmet. Here's Frank Gifford with the call for ABC's Monday Night Football that night.
For a 3rd down and 6. Duper, Moore, and Clayton. Out of the way. Into the arms of Clayton. Oh, and are things going right for the Dolphins tonight? 42-yard touchdown.
So the pass hit a Bears helmet at the line of scrimmage. It popped up into the air and fell into the wide-open hands of Mark Clayton running a dummy route. The Bears never threatened again, and the Dolphins won 38-24, snapping Chicago's winning streak and their hopes for an undefeated season. The loss didn't derail the Bears' plans for the season, though. They won their remaining regular season games, marched through the playoffs, and Super Bowl shuffled their way to a 46-10 win over New England in Super Bowl 20. But on this night, the '85 Dolphins reigned supreme. Are you a hockey fan? Then you'll love Eric Zweig's new book, Hockey Hall of Fame True Stories 2. It's a treasure trove of untold tales, bizarre incidents, and captivating trivia that will leave even the most devoted puckhead astounded. The intense rivalries, epic showdowns, and historic clashes that shaped the NHL's early years, it's all in there. Zweig uncovers the true stories that helped shape the sport, ensuring that you will never look at hockey the same way again. Check out Hockey Hall of Fame True Stories 2 on Amazon or wherever fine books are sold. On this day in 2021, The Memphis Grizzlies beat Oklahoma City 152-79 for the largest margin of victory in an NBA game. The Grizzlies led 31-16 after the first quarter. They were up by 36 at the break. Jaren Jackson scored 15 points in the third quarter to give Memphis a 113-62 lead. And they did not take their foot off the gas at all in the final quarter, putting another 39 points on the board with the reserve guys. Everybody who suited up for Memphis on this night scored, with Jackson leading the way with 27. The 73-point margin bested the previous record set by the Cleveland Cavaliers back in 1991 when they beat Miami by 68. And a little more recently than that, on this day in 2023, the LA Chargers beat New England 6-0. It was the third straight loss for the Patriots while giving up less than 10 points. That had never happened in the Super Bowl era, and it had not happened since the Chicago Bears had lost 4 straight while giving up less than 10 points back in 1938. And time now for today's Nothing to Do with Sports Did You Know? There is a debate among people with the time to discuss such matters about who the first person to receive a speeding ticket was. Walter Arnold was driving his vehicle through Kent in the United Kingdom in 1896 when he was stopped doing 8 miles per hour. The speed limit at the time was 2, but the rare vehicle on the road required a person on foot preceding the car and waving a red flag. Arnold had no such flagger. When a police officer saw Arnold speeding by at such a quick pace, he pursued him on his bicycle for 5 miles before finally catching him. Arnold was charged for his speed and fined a shilling. But there was no actual ticket involved. So there are those that argue that the first official ticket went to Harry Myers, who was racing through Dayton, Ohio at 12 miles an hour in 1904. Myers was the first to receive an actual written citation. That's going to do it for today. If you have a moment and are liking the show, how about leaving a 5-star rating on Spotify, or maybe even a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts? Every little bit helps. Have a super rest of your day, and I'll be back tomorrow with another edition of This Day in Sports History. This has been an original Thrive Suite production.